Again, I thought I'd do another quick reading. Um, One of the stories I'd wanted to tell for quite a long time was one from my childhood. Growing up in Saline, we had a cheese shop named Otto's Cheese Shop. And my friends and I never saw anybody go in or out of the shop. None of our parents shopped at Otto's Cheese Shop. We never saw cars in the parking lot. We never knew if it was open or closed or what was going on. And at the same time, at least in Michigan, we were fascinated with the mob and gangsters and that kind of thing. Um, I don't know if it was because of connections to the auto industry or what, but anyhow, we read a lot about John Gotti and ultimately his trial and that kind of stuff. And the two ideas kind of came together. I don't remember who ultimately came up with the thought, but the idea was that since we don't know what's going on in the cheese shop, it obviously is a front for the mob. And it was kind of this joke, but we talked about it as if it was, well, duh, of course, it's a mob front. And I don't know that any of us really fully knew what a mob front was or anything like that. Um, anyway, so when I set Lies from Beechwood Drive in kind of this fictionalized version of my hometown, I made sure they had their cheese shop and the mob story um, fit in there kind of neatly. So I got a chance to tell that story. And what happens here, this is chapter 5, kind of early on in the chapter, but really all you need to know is Bruce and his friends. Bruce is Esther's son. His friends have gotten in trouble for distributing pornography on the playground. And he's gotten in trouble with his mom for a couple other things as well. But for whatever reason, she hasn't said anything about the porn ring to him. And so he doesn't know if she knows about it and she's just not busting him on it or what the deal is. And so he's kind of a wily kid and he's trying to find a way to throw her off his scent. And he knows that she wouldn't be able to resist something like this. Here's a short section on that. Someone said, I don't remember who, that the cheese shop, Horatio's cheese shop, interrupted Esther. That one, said Bruce. What about it? Esther was very interested now. Her funk over the McKinneys' pornography was momentarily forgotten, and she was entirely focused on her son. Well, they said it was a front for the mob, said Bruce. A what? A front for the mob. You know, like gangsters run their gang out of there? That's ridiculous. In a pool? Asked Esther. But as she asked it, she realized it wasn't so ridiculous. Mobs were everywhere, and the whole point of a front for the mob was to hide in a place no one would suspect. What better place to hide than a cheese shop? Bruce and Esther had a good relationship, but he rarely offered information about his school day, much less a juicy rumor like this, without some prying. When Esther asked, How was your day? She was often greeted with fine, or okay, or a shrug of the shoulders. None of these provided much for Esther to work with, and she'd have to try other approaches. The thing was, since Esther volunteered at school, she knew about his day, and Bruce knew this. He knew she was trying to make polite conversation, but he didn't see the point of it. Esther would come back with, What about that art project you're working on? And Bruce would offer a minimal response. He found that the less he said, the more likely Esther was to stop asking. The conversation he was having now was proving his point. He threw out a nugget about something he'd heard at school, and suddenly he's being peppered with more questions. If he hadn't been in such a desperate situation, and he hadn't been so concerned about her finding out about his connection to the porn ring, he never would have mentioned Horatio's cheese shop. It was a Hail Mary. He knew his mother wouldn't be able to resist it, and he was absolutely correct. Her full attention was on him now. Her excitement about the possibility trumped her dubiousness about her son's giving unsolicited information. Bruce, however, knew the whole thing was a joke and a ridiculous idea. That's what I heard, said Bruce. In fact, he had heard this from someone else when he'd visited the library last week. Two high schoolers were talking at a table, and Bruce was trying to find a book on the shelf behind them. One of them said exactly what Bruce reported to his mother. You know that cheese shop? It's a front for the mob. And the other one laughed and said, You're fucking with me. The first one, who had made the comment, held a straight face for a couple of seconds and then cracked, Yeah, but wouldn't it be funny if it were? We need some excitement in a pool. The two high schoolers laughed. Bruce wasn't precisely sure what a mob front was, but he definitely filed the information away for later use. After he found his book, he went up to the librarian and asked if she could help him find some information on the mob and mob fronts. What? Asked the librarian. Mob fronts. I want to know what a mob front is. Okay, said the librarian. Is this for some kind of school project? No, said Bruce, just curious. Where did you hear about mob fronts? The librarian asked. Around, said Bruce. I'm afraid I can't think of any titles that would be appropriate for your age level, said the librarian. I can tell you a mob front is just a place, like a store, that the mob uses to hide their illegal activities. Does that answer your question? What's a mob? Asked Bruce. And what kind of illegal activities? I'm trying to think of an easy way to say this, said the librarian. I'm a smart kid and I read a lot, said Bruce. Just give it to me. Well, the mob is a group of people. In this context, we're talking about a gang of, like, mobsters. Do you know what those are? Or gangsters? The ones with the Tommy guns? Bruce mimed holding a Tommy gun. Tommy gun. He had seen a few movies about gangsters. Sure, said the librarian. Right, that kind of thing. They rob banks and launder money and that kind of thing. What's it mean to launder money? Asked Bruce. Honestly, I'm not sure myself. It has something to do with making it look like the money is yours instead of stolen, I think, said the librarian. But I have no idea how they do it. So a mob front is a store that they use to launder money? I don't know that they use the store to actually do the laundering, but they use the store to hide the fact that they're mobsters. Hmm. Okay, thanks, said Bruce. I also need to check this out, please. He slid his library card and the Beggar Queen onto the counter. Oh, Lloyd Alexander, said librarian. I haven't read this series yet. Is it any good? I like it better than the Pryden series, said Bruce. He left the library, book in hand, and knowledge for later use, which was now being used to good effect. He could see his mother's gears turning. She had taken the info and was running with it, even though she was questioning whether or not it was true. And so that kind of sets up another chain of events and that kind of thing. So, um, yeah, thanks for listening and reading if you have a copy. Um, I don't know if I'll do a couple other readings. I don't know. Send me some comments and feedback and that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much.